A very good morning to one and all. On behalf of ICRIER, I welcome you all to today's dissemination event titled Net Zero Transition and Clean Energy Employment, a modeling approach for the Indian economy. We have a distinguished set of speakers here joining us online and in person. So I request Dr. Amrita Goldar, Mr. Shubhashis and Dr. Kirit Parikh to please join us on the dais. Thank you. I now request Dr. Amrita Goldar to deliver the welcome address.
Yeah, very warm welcome to everybody. And thank you to all those brave souls who've braved through the chilly winter morning to come to the venue, and also friends who are joining us online today. So, for people who know me, know that I don't generally deliver a lot of welcome remarks. I'm more of a closing remarks kind of a gal, but please pardon me if I make any mistakes in the welcome remarks. So, there are 3 points that I have written down that I wanted to discuss as part of my remarks today to sort of begin the proceedings. The first thing is, while the event title says dissemination event, there is a caveat. This is by no means trying to state the fact that we know everything and we are planning to disseminate all that we know. If at all, we would like to say that we've barely scratched the surface of all the research that could be done on the subject. And the fact that this could, rather than being called a dissemination event, be called an inception event to the research that would follow from this. So that is point number one. Second is, maybe I would like to take you through the journey that we've had. And we started, I think, around 1.5 years ago to 15 months ago on this work program. We had started small. So, what we wanted to do was just to sort of tiptoe into these modeling waters, trying to gauge what we can do, etc., etc. But like a snowfall or a snowflake that turns into an avalanche, there's a lot of I would say, body of work that we have been able to accomplish in the last 15 months. And the slide before you is sort of giving you a glimpse of how the ICRIER's modeling foray has grown. These are tentative first steps yet. We want to obviously bolster whatever work that has happened, but you would also, I would say, agree to the fact that these are very interesting topics that we have picked up. And while today we are discussing Unnati regional CGE model, which you would see on the third panel, there are some other models also that we have going on that also may be interesting to some of the audience. So let me quickly take you through, not taking too much time there. First is the Samriddhi Global Trade CGE model that is built on the GTAP framework. So we have used it to look at the impact of carbon tariffs on India's trade competitiveness, and have also looked at the impact of explicit carbon pricing on in India on domestic production, exports, and emission levels. It is of obviously a very current relevant policy impact. So there are spillover effects of EU's emission reduction policies on export-oriented sectors that we are seeing. And there are also other macroeconomic impacts that go hand in hand with carbon pricing policies in any case. The second model that we have going on is called Sampada, which is a waste input-output model that looks explicitly at waste management policies. We are looking at the macroeconomic and technological gains from effective waste management, and also specifically looking at the impact of circular economy parks on the state's economy. Third is Unnati. So let me quickly go over it. In any case, you will learn about it more as you go in the second session. So that is looking at the employment impacts of India's net zero transition. And we are trying to build a regional model where we are trying to answer not just on how many jobs, but also where will the jobs be created. So that is interesting. And the fourth model that we have going on is called Prakriti, which looks at the impact of disasters on the regional economy. So we have, so it's not fully ready yet, but we plan to use it to build an adaptive or a state regional development plan to also measure the loss and damage compensation that would be needed for climate vulnerable regions within India. So after this sort of an overview and a little bit of shameless self-promotion, let's go on to the third and probably the most important point I want to make. So let me begin by maybe quoting Newton first. So in quotes, if I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulder of giants. So many of these giants are in the room. There are giants who might be listening in, who we will be meeting through the course of the day today. So let me take this opportunity to thank them profusely. So we have benefited immensely from their generosity, their kindness, and their wisdom. And something akin to maybe Saraswati Vandana that we used to do at school. Let me start the proceedings by acknowledging our profuse thankfulness to people who have guided us through the journey. So this we could not have done all of this without their immense support. So thank you so much. So with that, let us move on.
Thank you, ma'am. I now request Mr. Shubhashis to deliver the inaugural address.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and colleagues. First of all, I would like to echo what Dr. Goldar has already said, that thank you for making it today to this important and critical event. And we would get to know why I'm calling it important and critical as we keep on deliberating today for half a day. Now, today, as we stand at a pivotal moment in our nation's journey towards a sustainable and prosperous future, we are also in a critical juncture where next year the countries will present their updated NDC. And hopefully, the commitment where we have seen many of the developed nations where they have come up with NDCs which are critically missing a lot of component, be their past emission, which does not really reflects on their NDC commitment. And even for many of the developing nations, their NDC commitments are far away from what it is required for a sustainable future. And I'm not really getting into the net zero future as we speak. But as we gather to discuss this impact of net zero transition policies, and you are aware that India has already committed to a 2070 net zero trajectory, and even our current NDC is not fully aligned to that requirement of that trajectory. One critical component remains is that what are the policies which will drive clean job, address the skilling needs, and the interstate migration. Whether we like it or not, there will be migration because of the energy transition we are talking about. Now, how do we create policy, or whether the current policies or regulations can be modified to embrace this transition so that the impact would be minimal on the communities which are most vulnerable? Hence, the pursuit of net zero emission is not merely a policy decision. It is a commitment to safeguard our planet for the present and future generation. It is a recognition that the economic growth and environmental responsibility can go hand in hand. To navigate this transition, our focus must be on people, their job, their skill, and their mobility. First and foremost, let us acknowledge the undeniable impact of clean jobs. The transition to a net zero economy will be catalyst for innovation and creation of new employment opportunities. Clean energy and sustainable infrastructure, environmentally conscious practices will form the cornerstone of our job market. We stand on the cusp of the green revolution that will not only provide employment, but also redefine the very nature of the work in our nation. However, this transition requires workforce equipped with the necessary skills to meet the demand of the rapid evolving landscape. Our commitment to clean job must be paralleled by an equally robust commitment to skilling and education. We must invest in training programs that empower our citizens to excel in emerging sectors of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and clean technologies. By doing so, we ensure that no one is left behind in the wave of change and that our workforce is prepared to embrace the opportunities of future. Yet, as we envision this future, we cannot overlook the issue of interstate migration. The transition to a net zero economy will likely result in shift in employment pattern and opportunities, leading to increased mobility of our workforce across state borders. While this migration can be a positive force, unlocking untapped potential and fostering cultural exchange, we must also address this challenge as it presents. We need policies that promote seamless mobility, protect the right of workers, and foster a sense of national unity. In our pursuit of a net zero future, collaboration is key. Union, state, and local governments must work hand in hand with business, educational institutions, and communities to create a supportive ecosystem for clean jobs and a skilled workforce. We must engage in open dialogue, listen to the concern of our citizens, and adapt our policies to ensure that the benefits of this transition are equally distributed. In conclusion, the impact of net zero transition policies on clean jobs, skilling needs, and interstate migration is a complex and multifaceted challenge. However, it is also an opportunity for us to lead the world in creating a sustainable and inclusive economy. By investing in clean jobs, prioritizing education and skills, and addressing the dynamics of interstate migration, we can build a future that is not only environmentally conscious, but also socially and economically just. Let us embark this journey together with determination, wisdom, and a shared commitment to a better future. With this, I will conclude my initial remark and pass it on to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks, sir. I now request Dr. Kirit Parikh to deliver the keynote address for the event.
Thank you very much for asking me to give the keynote speech on this very important subject and topic. We know that net zero requires activities and actions or policies in a whole lot of different sectors in the economy. We have to have power, which is what we have been mostly concentrating, gets renewable energy. And it will create lots of jobs, clean jobs of setting up power plants, rooftops, and so on. But at the same time, we should just not forget the co-cost of these things, not just co-benefits, but co-cost. And co-cost are a large number of workers in the coal sector, coal mining sectors would find their jobs threatened. And not only they, but there is a whole ecosystem around a coal mine. There are many others who are not actually directly employed in the coal mines are also affected by it. And similarly, if you look at the transport sector, electric vehicles is really what we are pushing. And the various obstacles to electric vehicles, the range anxiety, etc., are being overcome. And I'm sure that we will have clean electric vehicles which will be acceptable to everyone by maybe 2030 all around the world. But the real problem here is also the same kind of thing, that you have a whole supply chain, that there are people who are supplying parts to IC, internal combustion engines, vehicles which are existing today. And they would need a very different kind of parts. and whether these supply chain workers can be easily replaced by new kind of supply chains. For this is a transition, and it involves a lot of, I think, employment consequences all around. Again, also in terms of maintenance and so on and so forth will be also this. And if most people do their charging at home because the range has been increased, then all these pumps and other things people employed in that will also be affected. So I think we should look at both the aspects, loss of jobs as well as the creation of new jobs. Similarly, if you look at industry, we are thinking of replacing coal by hydrogen and or electricity supplying directly rather than they're generated by plants with their own captive power plants. First of all, we need to sort out the data. What amount of energy fuels that industries use are going into generation, and what amount going into different kind of activities, which can be, and the ways in which it can be replaced. And I think requires sometimes industry level studies as well as. Finally, if you look at the households also, we are talking about the lifestyle for sustainable development. And that will also require motivating households to adopt these things. Now, over the years, centuries, I would say millennia, people, dharma gurus have been promoting frugal lifestyle. Unfortunately, contentment seems to be in the nature of human beings, and that those who have want more. And that's why I think it's difficult unless we really design products and processes and services which have economic benefits to the consumers. Then it's, for example, people are talking about take public transport. Now, what is it that I want, owner of a car, for public transport, so that I will take my trip through public transport? First of all, comfort. Second, it should not take more time than it takes me to travel from door to door by car. And that requires a different kind of approach to this. And I think we need to really think about these issues. Finally, the buildings, if you take it, is another large consumer of energy. And many people say that, if you have good architectural designs, you can save a lot of buildings. There are buildings which have been given a platinum rating. And if you look at how much energy they have saved, they will say we have saved 75-80% of energy. And then you look at where the energy saving has taken place, and you find that mostly about 15% is all that you can ascribe to design of the shell. The rest is all efficient appliances, better management of heating and ventilation and air conditioning things, and so on and so forth. So it is really the whole aspect of designing or creating energy efficient appliances and making them cheap enough so that people will adopt that is really the critical element here. But what one is saying is that, the supply chain becomes very critical. And anything you do, for example, if you are building a solar plant, what the amount of material, steel you need, the amount of labor you would employ, all these will be very different than the amount of the labor you will need in building a coal plant or operating it. But similarly, I think one has to also recognize that all these activities requires investment. And if I want to replace a 1 megawatt of coal power plant, I will need to invest in 4 to 5 megawatts of solar or wind power plant because they generate only 18% of the time the electricity. And therefore, I need a lot more upfront investment. So even if the levelized tariff is competitive, I will still need finance. So having climate finance becomes extremely critical. And how do you raise climate finance? What do you mean by climate finance? First of all, we mean by climate finance, I think in this sense, is something that is long-term and something that is low interest. And that is the critical thing. Who will give low interest loan? And who would invest in banks or bonds which will provide only, which will earn only 2% interest rate? And therefore, I think we need to worry about what kind of procedures, what kind of mechanisms we have to raise globally climate finance. Sometimes ago, Jyoti and I made a suggestion that this can be done by taxing, charging a parking fee for putting carbon dioxide in the global atmosphere, because it is warming that causes global atmosphere stock of GHG in the global atmosphere that causes warming, and not the annual addition to it. Annual addition, of course, adds to the stock and to that extent, but the stock is critical. And so what is important as an economist, one would say, you should tax products which are really causing the problem. Similarly, I think so all this would say that we need to have a modeling approach to many of these things, because modeling is critical in understanding these consequences on other sectors. Because if I do something, all other sectors are affected, and we need to understand what are the employment implications, loss side as well as gain side, in a clear way. And I think so. So I think, and one has to recognize that policies cannot be really implemented by diktat alone. You need to create incentives. You need to create things that is, or mechanisms or policies which are win-win-win. Unfortunately, any policy change that you make hurts some people and benefits others. So I think those who are hurt, sort of, will, if their political power is sufficient, they would try to stop it. And therefore, I think it is always important to think in terms of not just one policy, but a package of policies that would sort of become win-win-win for all concerned, you could say, stakeholders in any particular aspect of this. So I think it is quite important that one looks at it in a more comprehensive way, understand the behavioral aspects of various stakeholders, understands the impact of one policy on the rest of the sectors in the society, and then integrates these in a way. And I think for this, it is very critical that we have a modeling approach. I mean, IRADe, which is the Integrated Research and Action for Development, we are looking at many of these aspects, and we have been in the modeling business I should say, modeling activities for a long time. And I think you could say it's in my genes in some sense. I started building planning models for India way back in 1962 at MIT. So I think it's a long journey. But nonetheless, let me say that I think this is a very important topic, and that it requires a comprehensive understanding of various aspects. And I'm glad that ICRIER is also working in this area. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you all the speakers to beautifully set the context of the event. Now it's time for the unveiling of the summary for policy makers, and I request the authors to please join the speakers on the dais. Sharma, sir. Thank you so much. Now I request Dr. Amrita Goldar to please give the token of appreciation to the speakers. Thank you. I now request the events team to please set the dais for the next session.
Yes, ma'am.
We now begin with the first session. I request Mr. Arpit Sharma, Ms. Diya Dasgupta, Ms. Sajal Jain to please come on the dais. And I also request Dr. Bhaskar Natarajan and Mr. Puneet Munjal. Puneet Munjal will be joining us online. I request Diya and Sajal to please present the results. Oh, the chair will set the context. So please.
Morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the team of ICRIER for setting up this wonderful workshop conference and inviting all of us and giving Skill Council for Green Jobs such a wonderful opportunity to put the views in front of you. To set the context, I would just take you back a few years ago when the Jawaharlal Nehru Solar Mission was launched. And the targets of the mission were revised 3 times. And India as a country was clearly shocked when the target came out to be that India would have the installed capacity of 100 gigawatts by 2022. I distinctly remember those lines that India would now go from megawatt to gigawatt. That was the first time India was feeling that kind of a growth, especially in the solar and wind sector. It was again revised because of the momentum. The ground reasons were we saw a lot of investments, we saw a lot of private sector coming in 2014, 2015. And the targets were again revised to 175 gigawatts. Some of us really felt that this 175 gigawatts is really an unachievable target. And how would we do that? Multiple reasons: investment, grid stability, lack of skilled manpower, lot of issues. That was the time when India started gearing up its workforce, its technology transfer. And we saw massive, like doubling the installations every year in order to achieve that target. And then happened COP26, where we all talk about the Panchamrit. And it's also mentioned in my note also, which was a huge game changer. Government of India announced that we would have our 50% energy requirements to be met by renewable energy sources. India would have its renewable energy installed capacity taken to 500 gigawatts. India would be net zero by 2070. And India would reduce its 1 billion tons of carbon emissions by 2030. And this was huge. Now, if given an opportunity, and I have to decode it from my level, frankly, taking the installed capacity to that level is certainly a Herculean task, but it is not an impossible task. If we see, there was an analysis done way back in 2015. Even as a country, we use 4% of our wasteland, and we install solar, utility scale solar. Then also we can meet the entire country's energy requirement. So that is the kind of potential as a country we have. But reduction of carbon emissions for 1 billion tons, I mean, it is not a joke. I mean, we have countries like US, we have countries like China. They have been historical polluters. And India, now it is our time to grow. We are a developing country. It is our time to grow. Now, India said that we will grow, but we will grow in a sustainable manner. And that's where the real momentum, kicked in. Eventually, the green hydrogen mission was launched by Government of India, where the cabinet approved an outlay budget of around 20,000 crores in 2023 on 4th of January, and India aims to produce around 5 million metric tons of green hydrogen. This would also increase the renewable energy capacity to an additional capacity of 170 gigawatts. So 500 gigawatts, 170 gigawatts, this is going to be huge. As a result of COP26, as an after effect of Paris Agreement, Skill Council for Green Jobs was created. The ministry felt that there is a need that the skilled and certified manpower needs to be created in the country. It's set up in 2015. We were able to design courses like solar installation technician, solar grid engineer. We identified, after doing multiple skill gap analysis with various multi-stakeholders like CW and RDC and GIZ, we identified that India requires job roles like an individual who can actually finance the renewable energy project. So you need bankers who need to be trained. You need people in the artificial intelligence who would manage the grid, because it's grid supposedly the most complex man-made structure by humans. and where the decisions have to be taken in nanoseconds and it is completely overfed, you require the role of AI would play a very important role. So these are the kind of jobs that, India witnesses and India would see by 2030. In our estimate, India would see a job creation in multiple solar domains, in multiple job roles, or close to 4 million jobs would be created by 2030, and 6 lakh jobs would be created by 2030 in the green hydrogen sector alone. So this is the kind of employment potential India has in this particular space. As far as the trainings are concerned, of course, it becomes the prime responsibility of institutions of good repute till the time they would not be engaged in this kind of work, in the kind of training, in the kind of capacity building. These trainings would not have any meaning. So we took an effort and affiliated around 550 good institutions in the country today. Of course, they are A+ category, A category, B category. Every institutions have their own reservations in terms of infrastructure, but at least the least that we can do is we can have good trainers, we can have good teachers. So the capacity building of trainers and teachers is the prime objective of this country today when it comes to capacity building. And another, without taking much of time, because I got some really important panelists out here, and I don't want to bite their time. New education policy would play a very, very important role in terms of sensitizing youngsters to get into the STEM education, where we see that if through new education policy, we are able to include vocational courses in solar and renewable energy and green hydrogen, we are able to include these courses at the school level or at the college level. So there would be a lot of sensitization, and the inclusion of women, which is currently less than 15% in the energy sector in the country. We also estimate that this percentage would go up to 18% by 2030. So a lot of initiatives are being taken up. And this was about setting the context. Now I would like to maybe hand over to my fellow panelists. The introduction. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir, for setting the context. The structure of the presentation is as follows. We begin by explaining the objective and policy relevance of our study, followed by explaining the methodology that we have used for estimating clean energy employment. Then we provide an overview of the results, followed by the key takeaways and the possible areas for future work. Like Sir mentioned, India had announced during COP26 a 5-fold strategy to combat climate change and limit the global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, as the country moves towards achieving those targets, substantial increases in non-fossil fuel energy and energy efficiency measures will be needed, which are accompanied by macroeconomic benefits, employment creation being one of them. The current study focuses on the state-level effects of employment as the country moves towards these targets. And while prior research has focused on the why and how of energy transition, our study aims to answer the question of where the employment will be created. Now, to the best of our knowledge, our analysis is a first attempt towards estimating employment in the energy efficiency relevant industries. This, alongside our estimates for non-fossil fuel-based employment, will help us identify employment trends and also gauge the need for future policies. Added to this is the skill-based decomposition of the employment, which helps add another layer to our analysis. Before we begin with explaining the methodology, there are a few things that I would like to mention. First, when we say clean energy employment, we are referring to employment that is emanating from the non-fossil fuel energy sources and energy efficiency relevant industries. Second, our analysis is restricted to 8 resource-rich states that we have identified. These states each account for 5% or more of the combined all-India installed capacity for solar and wind, and collectively represent 86% and 99% of India's solar and wind capacity, respectively. And third, that our employment estimates only cover direct employment. Okay, so for estimating employment, both for the current and future, and by current, I mean as on 21-22, we make use of full-time equivalent coefficients that have been provided by existing studies for India. And the estimates for employment have been carried out separately for renewable energy and other clean conventional sources. And by other clean conventional, we mean large hydro, PSP, and nuclear. So within renewable energy, we begin by using the cumulative installed capacity data starting from 2008-9 and use that to calculate the annual and incremental annual capacity additions. This was followed by multiplying it with the relevant FTEs to arrive at the employment estimates for each year, and then summing it together to arrive at the cumulative estimate. The numbers so obtained were then apportioned to states on the basis of their installed capacities as on March 2022. In the case of other clean conventional sources, we made use of state-wise cumulative installed capacity data. However, the FTs used in this case was only the operation and maintenance stage FTs. This was done based on the understanding that these projects are typically awarded in packages which span multiple years, making it challenging to calculate the annual employment creation. Specifically for employment that emanates from the transitory stages. The future employment estimates were carried out in a series of steps, the first being devolving the 500 gigawatt target at the state level by source. For this, we make use of the data provided by CEA's report on optimal generation mix that provides the bifurcation of 500 gigawatts across different sources. They have arrived at this bifurcation based on an optimization exercise wherein they're minimizing the least cost, minimizing the cost of meeting the projected demand in 2030, which is in line with the data from the 20th Electric Power Survey. And one thing that needs to be mentioned here is that their bifurcation does not divide solar PV into ground-mounted and rooftop solar. So for this study, we have capped solar rooftop installed capacity at 40 gigawatts, cumulative solar rooftop capacity at 40 gigawatts in 2030, and assigned the rest to ground-mounted solar. This has been done based on the understanding that as of December 2023, only about 11 gigawatts of rooftop solar has been installed, which showcases a deficit of about 28 gigawatts against the target that had to be met earlier by 2022. So once we have the division of across sources at the national level, this was apportioned to states on the basis of their existing capacities. And using the data for existing as well as the target that has to be reached, we calculated the CAGRs to project the cumulative annual capacities for the period in question. Now, for other clean conventional sources, a slightly different approach was followed. So at the state level, the installed capacities are pre-identified and site-specific. For this, we gathered information regarding the specific plants that was identified by CEA's optimization study. The next step was to calculate the additional employment for the period in question. Same as before, the annual and incremental annual installed capacities are multiplied with the relevant FTEs. Now, in the case of other clean conventional sources, since the identified capacities are all fresh capacities, we assume a one-time addition of installed capacity and use the relevant FTEs to arrive at the required number. Now, when we say future employment, we mean employment, cumulative employment calculated as on 21-22 and add the additional employment creation over the period of 2022 till 30. Coming to the employment estimation for energy efficiency, similar to non-fossil fuel sources, this has also been conducted in a series of steps. The first being devolving the national energy savings target that is provided by the strategy plan towards developing an energy efficient nation to the state level. However, in light of the revised NDCs, the cumulative target for India was revised from 86.9 MTOE to 150 MTOE. And for the current energy savings data, we make use of the data provided by the National Energy Data Report. And both of these have been proportionately apportioned to the states. Now, coming to the estimation of energy efficiency relevant employment, this has been done in the following manner. We make use of the employment numbers calculated for 21-22 using the PLFS survey and divide that by the actual energy savings in that year and use this ratio to multiply with the target for 2030 and arrive at an indicative estimate of energy efficiency relevant employment. I now hand over to Sajal to walk us through the methodology for the current energy efficiency employment estimation.
Thank you, Diya. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sajal Jain, and I'm a fellow at ICRIER in the CCUS team. So as Diya indicated, our analysis also includes an estimation of E-relevant employment in E-relevant industries. This is again, as she said, based on the PLFS secondary database for 2021-22. Now, what do we mean when we say relevant employment? So the E-employment literature has been relatively limited if in comparison to the RE employment literature. And this is more so because of the multiple definitions of E-employment that exist around the globe. So while they give us more freedom to adapt definitions, it also makes it a little more challenging to assess the exact size and scope of energy efficiency workforce. So in our analysis, we define energy efficiency employment to encompass employment in related or relevant industries that encompass the manufacturing, production, installation, construction, and maintenance of energy efficiency products, basically products that improve energy efficiency, as well as services that help reduce final energy consumption by the end users. This is again based on the methodology or definition of EE jobs as adopted by the US Energy and Employment Survey, which faces comparable challenges like India in terms of defining a particular industry as energy efficient. So since these estimates are based on related or relevant industries, the obtained estimates in our analysis for energy efficiency employment are called as E-relevant employment in E-relevant industries. Now to move to the assessment methodology. So the analysis has been broken down into 4 steps, as you can see on the slide. The first step is formed by identification of broad energy efficiency sectors, which will eventually help us to identify the E-relevant industries in the analysis. This is facilitated by the list of energy efficient technologies that is certified by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, as well as the PAT scheme sectors. So this list that BE certifies basically provides details on E technologies and procedures in different industry divisions, which then aids to identify the E-relevant industries that we are assuming in our analysis. And of course, the PAT scheme sectors symbolize industries that have been known to carry energy saving potential. So the mapping of the two together in our analysis revealed about 32 energy efficiency sectors. Then comes the second step, which involved the identification of those E-relevant industries. So this involved the mapping of the entire identified 32 energy efficiency sectors to the National Lesser Classification of the NIC codes at a detailed 5-digit level. So what I mean by this is that the entire industry division was analyzed for any related or relevant industry linkages to energy efficiency based on the BE list of technologies that we had, as well as the methodology, as I just previously mentioned in the slide, covering industries, manufacturing, and then other aspects. So this revealed on the basis of the PLFS 2021-22 about 313 E-relevant industries. Realizing that this is a huge number, we added another filter to our analysis, which gets me to the third step of identifying E-relevant occupations in the analysis. So here we map the in only energy relevant occupations or designations that exist in the entire industry divisions, which is again facilitated by the National Classification of Occupation Codes at a 3-digit level. When I say occupations, we have covered both technical and managerial occupations. And when I say managerial occupations, this is more of high-level designations that sort of are the decision makers on introducing energy efficiency in the production process. And the technical occupations are the professionals or the engineers, machine operators who are more directly involved in the implementation of that decision to ensure energy efficiency in the entire production process. This mapping then revealed about 24 E-relevant occupations in the entire set of 113 occupations in 313 E-relevant industries. I know there's a lot of numbers. I'm getting to the final number. Please bear with me. The identification of these E-relevant occupations then brought down the relevant industries to a smaller number of 255. So in the PLFS round for 2021-22, we identified 255 E-relevant industries based on 24 E-relevant occupations. realizing that each industry division still represents a broad set of industry groups, we come to the fourth step where we have clubbed the 255 E-relevant industries to 23 energy efficiency groups or EEGs. Basically, those groups contain all the similar industry divisions or products together for just ease of operations. So our analysis, to sum this up, is based on PLFS 2021-22 for 255 E-relevant industries and 24 E-relevant occupations. Of course, as Sir was stressing, skill is a very important factor. I don't think I need to stress on the fact that skill plays a crucial role in not just increasing the productivity of the workforce, but ensuring overall holistic development and better macroeconomic benefits for the entire economy. So, of course, we also have a skill-based assessment in our analysis. And how do we define our skills? Our skills are defined at 3 levels based on occupations, again, and technical education, as well as vocational training. So as you can see on the slide, the first group or the high skill level consists of senior occupations, majorly directors and CEOs, decision makers, or people who have received a technical education of above graduate level, or people who have received vocational training through the formal route. Second is the medium skill level that includes occupations, the semi-senior occupations of technicians, the professionals, or people who have received vocational training other than the formal route and who have received a technical education of below graduate level. And the low skill level is formed by elementary occupations and people who have neither received vocational training or any technical education. Now I will request Diya to please take over for RE results, and I will be back for EE results. Thank you.
Okay, so based on our analysis, the cumulative all India employment as on 21-22 for renewable energy was found to be 2.82 lakhs, with biomass and solar each accounting for about 44% of the total, followed by wind and small hydro. The corresponding numbers in the case of other clean conventional employment was to the tune of 36,000, with large hydro and PSP accounting for 74% of the total. In terms of state level performance, Maharashtra and Karnataka recorded the highest number in terms of cumulative employment for RE at 45,000 and 42,000 respectively. And if we look at the source-wise employment performance, Tamil Nadu recorded the highest employment for wind. That accounts for 25% of the all India number under this category. Similarly, Gujarat in the case of rooftop solar, Rajasthan for ground mounted solar, Karnataka for small hydro, and Maharashtra for biomass. In the case of other clean conventional sources, nuclear installed capacity in India is restricted to 6 states in India, out of 5 of which are a part of our resource-rich category. And within this, Tamil Nadu recorded the highest employment. Similarly, within our resource-rich states, for large hydro and PSP, Karnataka and Maharashtra recorded 8% and 7% of the employment in this category. Coming to the additional employment creation for the period in question, the all India additional employment between 22 till 30 was calculated at 4.85 lakhs, with solar taking the lion's share of roughly 84%. And the corresponding estimates for other clean conventional was to the tune of 1.01 lakh, with large hydro and PSP accounting for about 68% of the total. In terms of state performances, Rajasthan and Gujarat are expected to record the highest additional employment during the period in question, while the states leading in cases of the different sources remain the same here. The proportion of the all India employment that they account for vary. In the case of other clean conventional sources, CA has identified fresh nuclear capacity to be present in 4 states in India, 3 of which are a part of our resource-rich category. And within this, as before, Tamil Nadu would account for the highest share for nuclear-based capacity, and Andhra Pradesh in the case of large hydro and PSP. So this brings the total cumulative employment as on 29-30 at 9.05 lakhs, which includes the additional employment creation of 5.86 lakhs. And you will see here that we have grouped the energies into three categories of other clean conventional, solar, and other non-conventional. This has been done to harmonize the groupings based on PLFS, to follow the PLFS nomenclature, which has been used for the skill-based analysis. And assuming a business as usual scenario, we have used the skill shares as on 21-22 to continue till 2030. And we find that the proportion of low skilled workers is the highest across all three energy groups. In the case of non-conventional energy sources, the data indicated that the medium skill category is not represented. Similarly, under solar energy, the share of high skilled workers was found to be greater than medium skilled workers, while the opposite was true in the case of other clean conventional sources. I hand over to Sajal.
Sorry, this was the last one for promise. Okay, moving to the E-relevant estimates. So our results find that the E-relevant employment in 2021-22 stands at about 12.7 lakhs. It is critical to point out that this estimate is based entirely on the medium and high skill level of employment composition. We have not included the low skill level. This is based on the idea that energy efficiency, at least now at the current stage, involves more decision-making powers and the implementation capabilities that perhaps rest in the senior and semi-senior designations more. So on similar lines, the cumulative employment estimate for 2030 stands at about 42.8 lakh, and which basically translates to an addition of about 30 lakhs for a period of 2022 to 2030. Moving to the resource search state story, as you can see on the slide, the 8 resource states take a significant share of our E-relevant employment estimate, about 70%. However, there's significant variation amongst the states themselves. Tamil Nadu leads the total, followed by Gujarat, Karnataka, and Maharashtra. These numbers sort of resonate with the State Energy Efficiency Index that the AEEE does, and in the latest estimates, the index amongst the resource rich states, the index accounts for Rajasthan, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, as in the front row or the front achievers category, and Maharashtra is assigned as an achievers category. Basically, this sort of resonates with our results in the sense that these states already carry in high energy efficiency potential, and the ones not featured in the index currently in the major groups definitely have the potential to take it forward. This slide is more to the filters that we apply to our overall estimate. So if you see on the, to talk about the sectoral story, the EEGs that I was mentioning previously on the upper right side of the slide, among the 23 EEGs, we find 4 EEGs to take a majority, about 77% share of the E-relevant employment that we estimate, which is again led by the cross-sectoral electrical and followed by the power, building and material, and transport sectors. Now, these sectors basically resonate with what the PAT scheme sectors certify, in the sense that these 4 EEGs cover industries such as manufacturing of consumer electronics, manufacturing of transport equipment, construction and maintenance of power plants, building insulation services, and the same. Moving to the occupational side of the analysis, since I've been talking a lot about occupations, on the left side of the slide, you can see again there are 4 designations that take the majority share of the E-relevant employment, about 65%. What is interesting to note here is that in the top 4 designations that we find, the top 2 are pertain more to the medium skill level, and the rest 2 pertain to the high skill level. So there's a sort of a mixture of both in the current E landscape as we estimate, and where the medium skill level takes a lead, and which gets me to my last graph. As you can see, medium skill level dominance in the E-relevant landscape right now. As you can see in the resource states, majority of the employment is again in medium skill, but in Karnataka specifically, there is no high skill. It was observed there is no high skill level of employment in relevant industries. Trying to sum this up, the key takeaways that we find important from our analysis, there is no doubt that elevated RE and E targets will definitely yield substantial employment benefits. Assuming that India is able to achieve its 500 gigawatt target by 2030, the employment is expected to grow by a factor of 2.8. And again, assuming that India is able to achieve its 150 MTU energy savings target, we assume that the employment is expected to grow by a factor of 3.8. In the resource-rich states that we assume, while the 8 states for both RE and E relevant landscape take a huge share of the estimated employment, there is significant variation among the both. RE showcases a low skill dominance, whereas E relevant landscape showcases a medium skill level dominance. This basically sort of the major takeaway comes out to be that there's a huge need to ensure an optimal balance of skills in both the RE and E. And I think a skill enhancement efforts should form the basic central policy focus and will help to provide gainful employment opportunities for the youth, as well as the training centers would get a better idea of the requirements of skills at different states. To quickly run through the probable future work areas, since this is a relevant employment estimate for energy efficiency, we feel that for a more comprehensive analysis or a more precise estimation and analysis on perhaps on tasks or direct task activities, usually the E would be a better would help to serve as a better representation and add to the analysis that we have just made. Again, focusing on the skill balance that is required, a state-specific narrative on skill profiling would help immensely to understand the needs of the state, the strengths of the state, as well as help to add to the national level policies that need to be framed for specific green skills. And third, given that RE, similar to RE, perhaps an estimation of what scale of employment can be generated through E investments can help to enrich the E employment literature further. Thank you so much for listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sajal. It was indeed a very insightful and a wonderful presentation. In the public forum, I would really like to make a substantial announcement. Of course, we have talked about renewables, we have talked about various subsectors, but we would be extremely happy if a joint kind of a study could be done. And if I divide the sectors into further subsectors, there would be jobs in solar installation and commissioning, in electrical, in civil, ground mount would be different, rooftop, we have seen that recent announcement by the Honorable PM, would give a huge momentum to small and medium scale companies to do the market acquisition. We'll have jobs created in solar PV designing. We'll have jobs created in the solar proposal evaluation specialist, would be a finance person, in marketing. Then we have open access companies now, who are really not very much dependent on selling the tariffs to the government. You would require private parties to get into a PPA mode. Solar wind hybrid would create a lot of jobs. And then we have green hydrogen, manufacturing of electrolyzer, the technician, the entrepreneur. I've written a few of them. I don't know, I'll be missing some of them. A lot of jobs would be created in the ESG space for the top management of the company, the way you highlighted the small fraction percentage in the top management sector of every organization. So ESG would play a. We'll have freelancing auditors who will be doing greenhouse gas emissions accounting, those kind of jobs. I recently met one of the organizations, they are into green hydrogen manufacturing through pyrolysis. So those kind of jobs. And one very important area that we always do not include when we talk about RE is renewable energy and waste management. So unfortunately, you see a lot of waste management, CETPs, STPs not functioning today because they're not powered. So powering the sewage treatment plants through renewable energy sources would at least make them functionable. And waste and electricity, they are not only interlinked, they are interdependent also. So these kind of jobs, we would be very happy to take a study and cover all these sectors, and state-specific study would be a good idea. Thank you so much. Yeah. So we'll be starting with the panel discussion now. I would like to introduce our speakers for today. So we have Ms. Sajal Jain on my right-hand side. You heard her. She's a fellow in the climate change, urbanization and sustainability from ICRIER team. She's got over 6 years of experience and works with a wide range of topics spanning to clean energy employment, climate financing, climate negotiations, electric mobility, e-waste, renewable energy, and industrial competitiveness. Her noteworthy projects also include estimating nationally determined contribution target, implementation costs in India, contributing towards estimation of India's adaptation expenditure, and she's also she's also a MSc in economics and financial economics from University of Warwick. Her bachelor's from University of Delhi, and her research interests include green employment, climate adaptation, circular economy, electric vehicles, green financing, green negotiations, and many more. So I would like to welcome Ms. Sajal Jain. Thank you. Then we have Ms. Diya Dasgupta. She's a research associate in the Climate Change, Urbanization and Sustainability Division at ICRIER. She has got over 4.5 years of experience and works on a wide range of topics spanning to renewable energy, climate financing, climate negotiations, and energy modeling. Some of her noteworthy projects also include estimating nationally determined contribution target, implementation costs in India, climate negotiations for G20 Energy Transition Working Group and Clean Energy Ministerial, and adaptation financing. Diya also completed her MSc in Economics from TERI School of Advanced Studies and her BA in Economics from Lady Shri Ram College, University of Delhi. Welcome, Diya. Thank you so much for being here. And now we have Mr. Bhaskar Natarajan. He's the Program Director from Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy. Mr. Bhaskar has over 25 years of experience in the field of energy, policy, and sustainable development. He has worked with government agencies, private sector, civil society organizations, and funding agencies. Mr. Bhaskar has also worked with grassroots agencies to implement renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. Mr. Bhaskar has worked with the government agencies under Ministry of Power and Ministry of Environment and Forest Climate Change, as well as with the NGO sector. Mr. Bhaskar has an extensive experience working with multiple stakeholders that include special focus on gender equity and diversity. So that is one of my research areas and favorite areas too. So Mr. Bhaskar has also written and published in national and international journals, and also publications as part of contributing to a book on renewable energy policy. And he has worked with the USAID PhD project as a deputy chief of party, prior to which he was managing director for Sequest Capital Green Ventures. And currently he is a senior fellow with Alliance for Energy Efficient Economy. I would like to welcome all the panelists and thank you so much for being here. Okay. So we also have Mr. Puneet Munjalji. He's joining us online. Mr. Munjal is a former chief regulatory and government affairs at TP Central Odisha Distribution Company, Tata Power. Mr. Munjal's career spans for over 36 years in the power sector. And Mr. Munjal is a seasoned professional specializing in the regulatory affairs, commercial, business development, finance, business excellence, and strategy. He's been working with Tata Power Group for last 20 years in various functions, and he has recently superannuated as a chief Regulatory and Government Affairs with Tata Power Odisha Discom. He was also the first CFO of TPCDOL on takeover of the Discom by Tata Power in June 2002. Mr. Munjal has been actively involved in advocacy with the Ministry of Power, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, CEA, CERC, OERC, with respect to evolving regulatory framework in all the segments of power sector. He's now based in Delhi, and Mr. Munjal holds a Master of Business Administration degree from the Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. It is our honor, indeed our honor, and our privilege to have you here. Thank you. So now,
You can sort of take the conversation forward.
Yeah.
Comments.
so if I, Mr. Bhaskar, we have discussed about the report. We have the figures in front of us. We also have some projections. How do you think that the government sector can play a vital role in creation of skilled manpower and improving the employment in this country, especially in the renewable energy space? What are your views on that?
Thank you to ICRIER for inviting me here. While I would make a couple of remarks on renewable energy, my main focus would be limited to energy efficiency, which is where IEEE has been working for the last 15 years. IEEE, for some of those who are perhaps not too familiar, is called the Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy, set up under a USAID bilateral project 15 years ago, and was initiated with members from the energy efficiency industry to start with. IEEE has about 55 plus members across energy efficiency industry with leading names such as ABB, Siemens, Schneider, and the likes, as well as smaller startups, educational institutions, and others. IEEE works extensively with the Ministry of Power, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency on the subject matter of efficiency technologies policies. And of late last year, the board of IEEE has instructed the team to figure out this important subject of saying, how much is the employment coming from energy efficiency? How much is the investment that is going into energy efficiency? We've got many reports globally and nationally that say so many billions of dollars have gone into RE. And as you've seen, so many lakhs and lakhs of employment that has come from RE. But for energy efficiency, there is really no number that is available. Nor do any companies, banks, or any institution report what is happening on energy efficiency. Canara Bank, Dena Bank, State Bank will proudly announce in their annual reports 20 gigawatts of RE supported. But energy efficiency, we know nothing. I'm sure they have supported. They support Tata Steel, they support Mahindras, they support everybody. But energy efficiency, there is no information that is available, even in piecemeal basis, let alone any kind of macro level information. And this is where this challenge that has been set by the board of IEEE made us start looking into where all is this happening. And we were extremely happy to hear that ICRIER was already working on this area and has looked at all these secondary data that is already available with the government data agencies. But before I get into some of the details of the numbers that ICRIER has put out both for RE and E, I think all of us must recognize a couple of dangers of numbers. Plus, we also need to see, is there a feel for how real are these numbers? 9 lakhs employment up to 2030 in RE. How does that feel? Do you think it's too small, reasonable, too large? How do I come to understand that the 12 lakhs, 15 lakhs numbers that have come from energy efficiency, are they real? How close are they to reality? What is the margin of error, if at all there is any? Because without trying to triangulate the numbers with any known sources, the numbers by themselves may not have much relevance. 9 lakhs, 12 lakhs, 15 lakhs, is it off by a margin of 10%, 50%? And this is where what we also tried to see in a slightly different way, looking at the ASI survey, which I think they also referred to. There were 8 categories of industries that were 100% dealing with anything related to energy efficiency. Example, motors, transformers, compressors, pumps. This is an industry category as categorized in the 4-digit category. They have, through the ASI, said that this industry has an output of, I don't remember the numbers, it is so many thousand crores, let's say 100,000 crores. That's in 2019-20, that was what the last report that is available for. We don't have subsequent numbers, but if you take normal Indian growth rates, 5%, 6%, or whatever, the 100,000 crores could be 120,000 crores. And now the question is twofold. Motors are energy efficient in some way. You have basic motors that meet the minimum energy efficiency standards of IE2 motors. That is, by law, nobody can make any motor below IE2 motors. Now, do we consider IE2 motors as energy efficiency base? Or, as many of us are aware, you have IE3 motors, IE4, and maybe IE5 too. Maybe they're all in small numbers. So therefore, if there are 50 companies that are manufacturing motors, and they have an investment of 10,000 crores. I'm just pulling numbers off the hat. They have no relevance because I don't remember the exact numbers. These are available in the ASI reports. And they also claim that they have employed about 10,000 people or whatever it is. Now, if I take these 8 categories, I said one was motors, there's another category that deals extensively with domestic appliances, electrical appliances, which covers everything right from TVs, microwaves, everything. Strangely, it doesn't include lighting. There is a separate category for electric lighting. So therefore, is there some way I can add these and say that these, now what are the data available? It says total fixed assets in these 8 categories. It's available for 2019-20. This, make an estimate, let's say 70% of it is energy efficient. If you take lighting industry, for instance, do I say 100% of the investment is energy efficient? Because LEDs and tube lights, they make 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star, 5 star. So do I say only 3 star and above will be considered as energy efficiency investments? And therefore, it will be interesting to try to triangulate these numbers with what has been put together. Now, as I said, we've looked only at the 8 energy efficiency categories. I'm very sure the 4-digit codes would also have similar categories for renewable energy. I think it's important for all of us in our research not to just quote absolute numbers, but to see where are these referring to. Because as you would see the last few weeks, there have been some numbers thrown about improvement in poverty. Some reports say poverty has increased in some ways. Some reports say poverty has decreased in some ways. And therefore, my suggestion to all of us working in this field is, instead of quoting final numbers, I think we need to figure out from two other sources indirectly, how do they compare? Talking of automobiles, for instance, and EVs as an example, for instance, we were told that we have about 35 crore vehicles in the country. Approximately, I don't remember, maybe more or less. And every year we add something like 2 crore vehicles. Last year, the car industry itself added 4 million, 40 lakh vehicles. Now, if we talk of employment and so on, is there any way I can just ask Mahindra, for instance, or a few startups, what is your level of employment? What is the level of investment that you got? And then try to see if I can see, are my numbers of 9 lakhs anywhere nearby, or whatever it is. So let me stop here and say that we need to understand that numbers in absolute sense don't mean anything. And offhand, if you ask me, the 9 lakhs for RE by 2030 for 500 gigawatts seems awfully small to me. I'm not saying just small. I think they are really small. There's something that I'm not able to put my fingers on. And similarly on energy efficiency, but those we are continuing to talk to them. We both of us want to understand, because all our institutions want to know how much are we contributing to the national exchequer and the economy. I'll stop here. I'm sure others have very important points to make. Thank you.
Mr. Bhaskar, thank you so much for bringing in your narrative. Actually, I would also like to supplement your thought. There are multiple researchers. Now, the primary audience or the secondary data that is collected is generally very much variable also. Then this data is also vetted by multiple agencies. So definitely there is some difference in the numbers, but more or less, yes, I would like to say that if we go to an exact number, maybe in due course in time, then you'll find them. And I'm really glad that you said that this is a conservative number. These are not skewed, highly skewed numbers towards the positive side. So yes, we see a lot of potential in the RE space, and also believe that these numbers are going to grow. So with that, Mr. Munjal, it absolutely a pleasure to have you on board, and you have been the former chief for the Tata Power Discom. We have also seen recently Odisha has come up with their renewable energy policy, and Odisha is also witnessing the green hydrogen mission to be implemented in specific areas. And organizations like WARI, they have also announced that they would be investing around 25,000 crores in the solar manufacturing in one of the areas near Ganjam district. So what is the convergence that you see with all your experience with the conventional power sector and the renewable energy space, and what kind of jobs can be created in the Odisha market?
Thank you so much for having me here and give a distribution perspective to this very critical issue. While transition is absolutely inevitable and is given, I think the term just, which has been now prefixed and which is taking increasing dominance on the transition, that a just transition is what is required, especially in a place like Odisha, which has 25% of, let's say, the coal, mining activity happening there, and so this gains increasing importance. Odisha is a very mineral rich state. It has the highest around 70% of Yeah, 100% of chromite, 73% of bauxite, 53% iron ore, manganese. So it accounts for India's, huge amount of minerals are basically mined from this place. And while Odisha does not contributes 3% to the GDP of the country, it contributes 9% to the total emissions of India. So because of the mining and mining activity which is happening there, there is a skewed extent of emissions which are generated out of Odisha. And so Odisha is going to be playing a very, very key role in ensuring that we reach the goal of net zero by 2070. And from that perspective, it becomes very, very critical that the transition which has to happen needs to ensure that while the new jobs get created, the old jobs, the reskilling also happens on, especially on the mining side. There's a huge amount of anticipated job losses which could actually happen on that side. And plus the ecosystem that Dr. Kirit talked about, the transportation system, the logistics which is there. So all of that needs to be addressed. While the interesting aspect is the entire coal is obviously, while the coal is being mined from Odisha and the emissions are actually getting debited to Odisha, but obviously that coal is not being utilized. All of it is not being used in Odisha. It is being mined out and transported out of Odisha. Whereas so the job losses are actually happening in Odisha, but the renewable space which is going to come up is not necessarily all of it is coming up in Odisha. So as you talked about, Mr. Sharma, about the RE policy and the industrial policy resolution which the government of Odisha has recently announced, and the green and ammonia, green hydrogen and green ammonia. The idea is to create a manufacturing hub in Odisha for green hydrogen and green ammonia, as well as historically, if you see, as it was pointed out, Odisha is not a RE rich state, but because of various issues of the and secondly, one is of course the RE. It is not an RE rich state. The second is the government of India's policies on giving ISTS interstate transmission exemptions, etc. So what is happening is the amount of capacity which is actually coming up within Odisha is not very significant as of now. So both the RE policy and the industry policy resolution tries to address that issue by offering very significant incentives. Probably one of the best incentives across the country which have been offered for green hydrogen, green ammonia. There's a 20-year window which has been given for what you call electricity duty exemption. There is a 3 rupees per unit subsidy or 3 rupees per unit of reimbursement on energy consumption, which has been offered for green energy, green ammonia units being set up there. So that there is a significant amount of incentives which are being offered for establishing units in Odisha. The emphasis is basically that what you call these so that the job losses are minimized, because the job losses, as I told you, are going to could be significant in Odisha because of the mining, etc. activity which is related to emissions, and that is what we are looking at reducing. So if those jobs have to be what you call protected, and people have to be reskilled, so it is important that manufacturing of RE at a larger stage, at a larger scale happens within Odisha. So that is where the government of Odisha is moving vis-a-vis with respect to both the energy and the RE policies that we talked about.
Thank you so much, Mr. Munjal. Actually, you brought a very important narrative and perspective. In fact, I was pleasantly surprised that the district Angul, which is one of the bauxite mining areas in Odisha, they have come forward and they want to get their people in the district through the district mineral fund. They want to get their people trained in the solar PV installation and green hydrogen. So I was pleasantly surprised, and Odisha is definitely one of the very forthcoming states when it comes to Jal Jeevan Mission or the green hydrogen or the solar mission. So thank you so much. I would now come to my next panelist, Sajal. I would like to know from you, after watching your presentation and your report, I would like to understand that how can the difficulty in obtaining the comprehensive data
can really impact the precision of employment estimates for energy efficiency initiatives. Can you please share your views on that?
Sure. I would first like to thank Dr. Natarajan for his comments. I totally agree with you, sir. These numbers definitely need to be compared and sort of understood well to sort of understand the realities of both RE and EE sectors. With our analysis, specifically with respect to energy efficiency, as we say, we call them relevant numbers because we sort of want to start the conversation there on how employment can be and should be measured. And obviously, these numbers we are willing to improve further because we understand they will improve further because they are relevant estimates and they need somewhat more vague estimation. And we actually did compare on almost one of the IEA estimates. The World Energy Employment Report that IEA gave out, they attribute about 11.5 lakh jobs for energy efficiency employment for India in 2022. So we did understand our numbers were still on the higher side, but this is more again because we don't one universal definition of EU. We understood that there's a sectoral and other definition conceptual difference. So again, these numbers should definitely be improved further, but sort of comparatively, we were in the similar page, and we realized that again, discussions with other stakeholders will help us improve these numbers further. Coming to the question that you've asked in a similar context, of course, as I just said, the lack of exact or I would say precise data on energy efficiency makes it very difficult for any researcher in the field to sort of pinpoint a number. Say that this is the sort of employment that is there, as Sir was also discussing. I would say, first of all, it makes it very difficult in the sense of how to accommodate for various aspects that exist in the employment structure of our country, as I would say, supposedly informal employment. Since we do not have the exact data, it's very difficult to pinpoint the composition of the employment structure, let alone understand the informal competence that exist in major shares in different aspects or in industries in the country. The data and other obviously raise an issue. We never sure that we only do a relevant or related estimate. The lack of exact concise data makes it difficult to find exact numbers and important job numbers. Then I think in my if we do not have, since there's no primary survey as such that is related to energy efficiency job or employment assessment, it makes it difficult to always rely on secondary databases as I was saying, no primary information available. So we have to sort of rely on different sources, and different sources mean different methodologies, and putting them together to come up with one number again makes it difficult. Yeah, I think I would like to end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sajal. In fact, I do remember the kind of reports that we published in past along with NRDC and CWW. They are your numbers, even after the secondary research, they are quite close to what we did with MNRE and other stakeholders. So yeah, I think Mr. Parikh has a question.
Can I ask you a clarificatory question? Are these numbers are employment days or employment years? Because if there is a solar plant rooftop, I'm clarifying question is, are these numbers employment years or employment days? Because when you're putting up a solar rooftop, it takes maybe 5 days of labor of some kinds, and then no further labor is required. Whereas a coal plant requires labor around the year. So I think it is important to clarify whether they are number employment person days or just person years.
Thank you for your question, sir. So the employment estimates have been used the FT coefficient, which is employment, which is job years. So it is employment per megawatt. And like you rightly mentioned, some jobs are short-term jobs while others are long-term jobs. So the FT coefficient helps turn the short-term the short term into a full-time equivalent number. So it is job years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parikh. So, Diya, I would like to come to you now. Could you please share your views or maybe elaborate about the importance of having some state-specific narratives towards preparedness for the new employment that needs to be created in the energy transition sectors?
Like we've highlighted in our study, so the state-specific resource endowments differ across states. So states will also have a very different workforce with very different skill levels. So each state will have to first gauge their existing skill gaps and what sort of training is required, what sort of skill set is required for, particularly for energy sources that are rich in that state. And in terms of, there will also obviously be differences in terms of the kind of industries that are present in each state. And I think that's all that I have to say.
Yeah, perfect. So now I have a common question to all the panelists here. And I would really want to seek your opinion if you agree on this or not. So while renewable energy has received quite a limelight in the last few years, and there is an urgent need for policy discourse to highlight the energy efficiency's contribution to decarbonization. So starting from Mr. Bhaskar, do all the panelists agree or disagree? And if you do, then what is your take on that?
It's never this versus that. It's, I think, both are required, as all of us are aware. And our director, Dr. Satish, gives a very good example in many occasions. I'm sure some of you may have heard it. It's called the leaking bucket syndrome. You have a bucket, you go on filling water in it, and there are holes, and the water will keep leaking out. Now, the water is renewable, so as much renewable as you're going to keep pouring into it, it's not efficient. It's being wasted. And this is where I believe that if you're talking of 500 gigawatts and there is no mention of energy efficiency, with energy efficiency, you might still be able to achieve your $1 trillion economy goals, whatever they are, with 400 gigawatts. And I think this is something that needs to be kept in mind as energy efficiency first, then renewables. And there are a couple of reports under the National Action Plan on Climate Change and also from the Bureau of Energy Efficiency that have estimated that the goals that are set for the NDC and in the commitments that we made, 51% of the target is expected to come from energy efficiency. These are official BE reports that are available. And therefore, we perhaps need to ensure that when I put a solar rooftop on my home, I don't have 10 fans of 75 watts that are running 12 hours a day in summer. Very important. And therefore, I would say that energy efficiency first, your solar capacity itself will reduce. From a 5 kilowatt, you might need only 4 kilowatts. Stop here.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Munjal, what is your point of view on this?
Yeah, to supplement, as a power utility, we'd like to sell more. So, keeping that aside, energy efficiency is absolutely critical. It is critical for the nation. It is critical for the consumer himself, because at the end of the day, the amount of energy that he consumes, he basically pays for. So if he has energy efficient appliances, if he's given those tariff signals appropriately, he's able to optimize and save on energy cost as well. And one important thing, as they say, that the cleanest and the cheapest unit of energy is that which is not generated. So if we can reduce the losses, we can, make our equipments efficient. That much of demand reduces. So as Mr. Natarajan pointed out that, we need to reach 500 gigawatt based on a certain level of efficiency. If the efficiency goes up, it's quite possible that 500 gigawatt requirement itself will come down. So entirely agree with him. From all aspects, it is the cheapest and the most efficient manner in which, what you call energy can be managed.
Thank you so much, sir. The way India is chasing its RE target, I am also chasing my target to close this panel discussion. What are your point of views? So I'll be in short.
Yeah, quickly, looking at from the assessment sort of an angle, I totally agree with sir. It's a twin objective. We can't separate the two. But I think this then stems to the fact that when you're assessing employment, specifically when you do not have a set definition, you look at secondary database as we did. But if you look at that, there is no sort of greenification, if I may call it that, of the codes that currently exist in our NIC, I would say National Industry Classification. That makes it always a sort of an indirect assessment because there is no code or specific industry that can be defined as sort of green or energy efficient, as I just discussed. So a lack of that definitely makes it difficult to sort of get into the deeper sense of the subject. So yeah, gamification of if I can use that term again, gamification of the codes and the sort of structures that already exist in our system to sort of give a better insights for assessments that I think all stakeholders here perform. Yeah,
that's a very unique point of view. Thank you, Sajal. And Diya, now finally to you. What is your point of view?
Okay, quickly, just adding to what Sajal said and what I think Bhaskar sir had also mentioned at the start of the session, I think it would be interesting to see or to investigate how investments in energy efficiency can spur employment. While you might have similar numbers in the case of RE, such sort of an assessment for EE is missing as of now.
Thank you, Diya. And I would like to thank all the panelists for being such wonderful speakers. To end this panel discussion, I would like to ask the audience, unfortunately, आप लोगों को involve नहीं कर पाए, but in the last, how many of you are swimmers? Can you please raise hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so there's a saying. It goes that when global warming would melt the earth, swimmers would rule the world. तो हमारे पास काफी कम लोग हैं यहाँ जो कि बच पाएंगे, but ठीक है, we still have time to learn to swim. Thank you so very much. Thank you for being such wonderful listeners. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Mujali, thank you so much.
come on the dais. I'll also welcome Dr. Aman Malik and Dr. Joydeep Ghosh would be joining us online. And ma'am, Dr. Amrita Goldar will be presenting the session. So, yeah, so I'll request sir to set the context of the session. Thank you.
Maybe you would like to say, come to order.
Everyone, please be seated. We'd like to start the session shortly.
Okay, I think we are already late by about 10 minutes. So let us start this session, which is session 2, the impact of net zero transition policies on clean energy employment, skilling needs and interstate migration. So thanks very much, ICRIER, for inviting me to this important session. I think, like all of you, I will be learning from the presentation because I have not read, I have not received the paper, nor do I have the modeling structure. So like you, I will be learning along with the presentation. So I will hand it over to Amrita for making the presentation, please.
So, yes. Before I move on to the presentation, so I think session 1 was where the dissemination part ended. Session 2 is still work in progress, and that is why, sir, you haven't received the paper. So we tried our level best, and believe me, we did, on getting the paper out as soon as possible, but the numbers weren't firmed up yet. So some of the numbers that I will show are, I would say, rough estimates. So we still have a month's time more to work on the numbers further, and there will be something similar. So there is a working paper 1, and I believe everybody in the room has a summary of it that will be released shortly. There will be a working paper 2 that will be covering the modeling aspects. That will be probably released in a month's time. So that is my excuse that I want to make, but let me move on to the presentation. So in the morning, I talked about some of the models that we are developing. Pardon us, I believe I also talked about giants. So Chadha sir is a giant. So we are in very early days yet, and we are still learning. So that is our excuse. So if you find any sort of weaknesses, which you will for sure, please, we'll be more than happy to sort of incorporate your suggestions. The second thing also is that you will notice that this panel currently is designed in a very interesting manner. So we have representatives from the what we would like to call the general equilibrium sort of space, while we have Aman, who's sort of representing the partial equilibrium space. So I would want there to be a happy marriage between the two schools of thought. So while we decidedly have taken a more general equilibrium approach, but I look forward to comments on not just improving the model, but also about how technologies and other things can be incorporated further. So, okay, moving on. So for basically the uninitiated who are probably looking at the modeling for the modeling of general equilibrium for the first time, these are some of the definitions that we sort of have to go through, normal rite of passage. So basically, something that you would need to understand is that CGE provides an economy-wide perspective. So in the morning, Kirit sir talked about both direct as well as indirect impacts of policy changes. So CGE is capable of doing that. You have representative agents that have a particular behavior that is modeled. So you have households that maximize utility, you have producers who maximize profits, and you have other sort of external final demand sectors that have their own optimization behaviors. And there is a set of equations that we sort of run to arrive at simulations about how a policy change would be. Now, my maybe small point that I want to make here is that increasingly I notice that people are using CGE for forecasting purposes. While we have also done that, but the point is CGE is extremely rich if you want to use it as a policy laboratory to check for any policy impact. I am a little hesitant on maybe endorsing this sort of a modeling structure if you want to look at effects in a sort of 2070 sort of a space, but it might be reasonably good if you are looking at maybe a shorter time frame, maybe 2030 or 2040. So I don't know if it is visible to everybody, but this is broadly the research flow diagram that we had employed. So basically, you have the development of research question, literature review, collection of economic and social statistics, definition of modeling scope and characteristics of the model, construction of the socio-economic matrix, which becomes the main database that the system of equations solves. You have the CGE model that is developed, and you have estimation, some exogenous parameters and some endogenous parameters. So you have the estimation and incorporation of what you believe exogenous parameters to be and their levels. You then calibrate the model to depict the BAU scenario. And then once the BAU is right about fixed, you then have policy simulations, which becomes wo agar hota to kaisa hota. So it becomes an alternative scenario. In our case, we have tried to do it for energy efficiency promotion. In the previous session, Diya and Sajal talked about the states. So when we started out with very grand ambitions. So we wanted to sort of emulate as closely possible the work that was done as part of the job analysis. So we also picked the same set of states. The rest of the other states were clubbed into rest of India. What we have tried to do, excuse me, is a multi-tiered analysis. So we start in terms of complexity from the easiest to the most difficult. So the easiest is pretty plain vanilla multiplier analysis. So we have used the SAM that we created for the baseline of 1819. And at this juncture, let me sort of acknowledge I would say the kindness and generosity and the wisdom of seniors from NCIRE. So a special shout out to Devinder sir, he's sitting there, and also Pohit sir, who have been sort of friend philosophers and guides to a lot of the modeling that we are doing. Okay, so this is the SAM that was created for the baseline of 2018-19. We estimated the direct and indirect employment generation by the Leontief inverse matrix. And we, like other colleagues talked about, we have made separate estimates for low educated, medium educated, and high educated workers. And we particularly were focused on different electricity types. So I think Diya had already talked about it, but let me just quickly go over it again. We have 5 different electricity generation technologies that we incorporate. So coal-based power, other non-renewable sources, so gas or diesel. We have power based on large hydro and nuclear, etc., that we call ELEC-OCC, solar power, and power based on other renewable sources like wind, biomass, etc., that's called ELEC-ONC. So this is, I would say, what we find. So this is pretty easy to do. So something that I would want maybe the listeners or the viewers to take away is that the first 5 sectors are some of the largest employment creators in the country. But if you look at the total employment generated to direct employment ratio, so basically what Diya and Sajal presented in the morning were direct employment ratios. But using the SAM, we can actually look at the total employment, which includes the indirect impacts as well. So you would see that on a comparative scale, agriculture, construction, trade, transport, textile, that are the largest employment creators, have, I would say, conservative impact on total employment. But on the contrary, if you look at the energy sectors, here electricity is clubbed together. So coal and lignite and electricity, you have a very high sort of impact throughout. So any perturbation made in direct impact has a large reverberation throughout the economy. So you have, as I've written below, energy sectors have very high relative spillovers in terms of employment creation. So any policy that has to do with energy has to take into mind the impact that it could potentially have on employment, not just direct, but indirect as well. Here, what we've tried to do is we are trying to look at the employment, indirect and indirect employment generation. So this is in persons per rupees crores of output across various electricity segments. And this is something that Kirit sir talked about in the morning. So what we also find that Elexi, which is coal-based generation because of its linkages to mining, etc., has a very high coefficient as compared to other sort of technologies. And the last 3 being the more cleaner sources have, I would say, on a relative scale, limited bearing. So in a sort of a trade-off, a per unit change in Elexi and per unit change in maybe Elec S, which is solar, will not be comparable. This is step 2. So I talked about a tiered approach. So from a plain vanilla sense, we are going down to, I would say, more complex things. So what we tried to do is we tried to develop a recursive dynamic CGE model. And we had a lot of difficulties, let me put it mildly. But anyways, so these are some of the structures that we have used. And this is borrowed heavily from a Japanese model developed by Hosoe, Gabasa, and Hashimoto in terms of how the equation systems are framed. And we have borrowed from that and we have adapted it in the Indian context. And this is the overall structure that we've used. The energy sector is represented by coal and lignite, petroleum, electricity. And electricity, you have 5 parts and gas. And the non-energy sectors are also listed in front. So overall coverage of Unnati is 41 energy and non-energy sectors. Now, some of you who are in the know would know that the supply use tables that are given out by MOSPI have much larger detailing. So they, I think, detail out 140 sectors. Because we know we had to go down at a state level, we have tried to keep things a little manageable. So we have aggregated a lot of things, and I think the aggregations will also be mentioned when we come out with the working paper. But these are the sectors that we decided to run with. Now, some of the exogenous variables and the factors of production. So we have delineated labor into high, medium, low skilled. Capital and labor stay as is. Some of the exogenous variables that we are looking at is also listed. Some of the parameters that the equation system models is also listed in this slide. Now, as I said, this is a dynamic model. So in our model, the intertemporal changes are induced by population growth as well as savings that translate into investment. Now, before we move on to the comparison of baseline to alternative, let us sort of take a look at what literature says. So when we started our work, so there were a lot of different modeling approaches that were available in terms of literature about how they are dealing with energy efficiency and renewable energy and how they are incorporating it into the framework. So in many cases, energy efficiency, at least this literature review in front of you shows, they have looked at literature, they have looked at energy efficiency more from the rebound effect sort of space. But in many cases, what they are doing is that they are incorporating something called autonomous energy efficiency improvement that comes into the production function. Alternatively, in some cases, they are using the mandates. And I am sort of reminded by, again, what Kirit talked about in the morning about the benefits of using incentives over mandates. So in the modeling framework, most of them have used mandates to show reduction in energy efficiency. Reduction in energy consumption. These are some of the renewable energy papers that we consulted. Now, I would say, and this is maybe an immature view on the subject, is that a lot of the renewables, there are a number of papers, and there seems to be a very much divided opinion on the impact of renewable energy policies. Now, there is, I think, an unarguable link between renewable energy policies and emissions. But in terms of macroeconomic gains, there were some who saw a regressive impact, while some who saw a progressive impact. So I think more needs to be done to look into it in greater detail at a macroeconomic scale. There is a lot of importance also that is given to the instruments that are used to get the policy in place. So if suppose taxation or a lump sum taxation or any other sort of indirect taxation is followed, it will have a regressive effect. But with, sorry, I have a bad cold. But with good revenue recycling policies that sort of try to ameliorate the welfare losses, you have a net benefit that is shown. These are, I would say, preliminary results that we see. So we have, like what literature said, we have tried to model reductions in energy savings through an exogenous mandate, and this is funded largely through private savings. Now, what we say, so this year, as I said, is 2018-19. This is based on the input-output tables provided by Pohit et al. 22. The timeline of analysis, so even though we start with 2018-19, this is a multi-year dynamic model, which is projecting till 2030. So you would see in front of you the graph. So this shows the factor inputs that are predicted. So you would see, and something that is echoing what was said in the morning as well, that you have major gains that are coming up in the low-scaled sort of space over time, while high-scale and medium-scale do not benefit too much. Some other results that we are seeing is obviously a fall in GVO in the alternative scenario. Now, what is basically happening is that there is a reduction in input consumption, but wages are adjusting to maintain full employment. So right now we don't have the equations in place to account for wage rigidities and structural unemployment issues. And there are obviously different behaviors across skill classes. So the way that maybe an unskilled labor or a low-skilled laborer would react to wage cuts would be different from a high-skilled laborer who might have higher reservation wages. So those are not accounted for. So I believe that with further modifications, this model would improve further. We interestingly notice an increase in composite consumption, and this is spurred mainly by the gains in energy efficiency translated into greater savings that happen. Now moving on to step 3, which is the regional computable general equilibrium model. And before I move on, let me sort of talk about that this is still work in progress. So what I would be presenting is more of the structure and our motivation. The results need to be formed up further. So that will be sort of the comprehensive paper that we will be coming out with. So a regional CGE is maybe a smaller version of the standard CGE models. Oops. Oh, yeah, echo. Didn't know I was making such an important point that needed echoing, but okay. There in recent literature, it has been used for a wide range of applications such as fiscal policy, tariff policy, transportation, alternative energy structure, labor markets, environmental policies, etc. So it's actually very rich. There are a lot of additional dimensions that could be looked at, specifically with respect to subnational administrative boundaries. So rather than looking at government as this large behemoth that most modeling studies could do, if we sort of fine tune it further and we have different entities, one for state government and one for the central government, you could very nicely see the impact of policies happening at a state level. Now, there are different ways in which RCGs are generally modeled. So one is a top-down model, so which sort of what we tried to do. So you use a top-down model. So basically you do a modeling for India, you get the results out, you have another parallel modeling system which allocates the results to the states, and then the states run their own CGs. That is more of a top-down structure. The second is a bottom-up structure, and that is more complicated to do because you need very rich data of interstate trade patterns. So any sort of shock or movement, because we're looking at migration within the state, how would it impact the neighboring states or the states that they go to? And the third category is obviously standalone models of single subnational regions, which I would largely ignore at this point. Now, top-down approach I talked about, so there is some, it has a long history. So our analysis started out with following this framework, but later realized that this will not be able to accurately predict migration. So we had advanced to some extent, but then we had to sort of put our plans away because migration results could not be sort of derived from those. We then moved on to a more bottom-up multi-regional CGA model. And this, believe me, is a gargantuan task because you are looking at 9 regions, you are looking at so many multiple agencies, and you are looking at 41 sectors. So even the SAM was mind-boggling, let alone the equation structure that needed to look into it. So the good part about bottom-up multi-regional modeling is because it is very strong technically, but it needs good quality data that is, I would say, a little lacking in India. So we had to put our minds to the test, do a lot of back and forth about how to create the data that is required, specifically with respect to interstate movements and interstate sort of goods and services movements. So this was a task. I'm skipping the single region. This is the RCG model flow diagram. So this right now is still in the works. This, as compared to the more elaborate sort of a structure that we had for the national CG, this is a much more, I would say, transparent and easier structure. But it has this capability of modeling inter-regional migration that we found to be useful. And if panelists feel otherwise, I believe this is the structure that we will be following. So we were working on the equation sets for the same, but the results are still awaited. So we will continue to work on the same thing. So this is my last slide for the presentation today. First is exploring the role of technology. So this is the elephant in the room. So any mandate with respect to energy efficiency or renewable energy is expected to spur innovation. Now, one way that it can be treated is you have that autonomous energy efficiency improvement, that A factor that is outside the production function. But is there a more intelligent way of doing it? So I leave it open to the audience. Second is gauging the impact of state and central government policies separately rather than one large government behemoth. So that will be very interesting to do because CG can be used, as I said, as a hypothetical policy laboratory that is very rich in explaining interlinkages. So looking at a central government policy vis-a-vis a state government policy, so they will have, I would say, synergistic impacts. So that will be very interesting to look at the marginal impacts of the two. Third is imperfections in the labor market. We have right now not been able to do it too much, but incorporation of wage rigidities, stickiness, specifically for low-skilled workers, unemployment rates of skilled labor, I talked about reservation wages, etc. It will be important for us to model that. And the last is transmission effects of shock from a state to a region. So the point is that with the increasingly globalized world, there is shocks can't be isolated. So transmission effect of a shock to a state, and this may not be a natural disaster, but an economic disaster. It may not, it could be a positive thing too. So how does it spread to other regions? So the analysis of contagion effects. So that is what we have planned out for model improvement. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Amrita, for presenting a structure that I was wanting to read earlier, but good that I now have it in front of me. And I think we have two very good discussants. Good friend, Dr. Jaideep Ghosh, welcome to the event, and Mr. Aman Malik from CEW. So I'm sure the discussants will bring forward their views on this. Before doing that, I just put up some bullets that I have noted while listening to what has been presented. First of all, if the discussants can comment on Aman in particular on partial versus general equilibrium issues, if you have in mind. And those who have not met with Jaideep and Basanta Pradhan have a wonderful paper on the similar issues which we keep referring to. So Jaideep, it is nice to have you with us at this event. First of all, yeah, you're welcome. First of all, I think I would like to know a little bit more about the SAM that has been used and the structure that I am seeing. It is 2018-19. So that's the base year. So I am not clear about if there is distribution among the households, because with energy policies, different categories of house, you mentioned about factors of production, 3 factors of production. However, with energy transition exercise, there is bound to be a lot of impact on the welfare of the households, the consumption patterns of the households. My first question is that a little more elaboration on how many categories of households, and if at all there is some analysis done for that. Why I'm putting these points? Because these will help discussants take this forward. Secondly, I think one big data issue that we also face is the base year employment numbers. So what is the source of that and how reliable are these would be my second ask from the discussants. Thirdly, it is interesting to see that electricity generation and coal and lignite have small share in the total employment, but their multiplier effect, that is total employment generated to direct employment, is 7 or 7 plus, close to 7 and 7 plus. But please note that as the years pass by and as we slow down on, because you showed coal being too high, you know, as we slow down, I'm not sure, I'm not commenting on whether we will or not. The assumption that we slow down on fossil fuels and coal generated electricity gradually, maybe even after 2030, would these large numbers be as attractive as they seem to be at 7 or 6.99 was one, 7.3 was the other. Fourth point is I am generally confused when we do the recursive dynamic models. There would be some closure rules that you are using in that, because I know more about the trade models where we use multiple closure rules. So if at all there is a closure rule that you have used, if that can be elaborated, and maybe Jaideep ji, you may be able to discuss on this because you have been working on energy CGE models. My fifth observation is that when we build the state level models, how is the ESAM replicated for each state? So surely you will be making some assumptions, but if the assumptions are that the production structure is akin to what the national ESAM structure is, there would be some problems when you say that bottom approach is better than. So if you can familiarize us while you comment after the discussants have commented on this issue of state level models, they borrow a lot from the structure of the, because there are no state level ESAMs separately, which are fine tuned, because there is a lot of interstate trade, which is yet unknown, except for GST might give you some, GST transactions might give you some reflection of that. And sixth, you said towards the end that energy transition is a big elephant in the room, or technologies are big, because we don't know how and how fast these technologies are going to change from lithium base to yet another base. And so I've been working a lot, by the way, on critical minerals for energy transition. So, and we should know that for most of the critical minerals, because unless you bring the trade elements somehow in, for many of the critical minerals, we are 100% import reliant, 100%, not 98, 99, 100% import reliant, despite the fact that we have resources which we have not been able to convert to reserves, and forget about production. My seventh point and the last point is that when we talk of the state level models, one of the important issues is migration. And to the best of my understanding, we know the least on how the labor migration takes place. Base year employment may be a difficult issue in itself, but interstate migration, if I can be made more aware towards the end, that'll be wonderful. So your future work on the role of technology, center state level issues, rigidities in the labor market, which means whether it is full employment or less than full employment, rigidity, and transmission effects from states will be important points that I am taking home and learning from this exercise. So with this, you will get the last chance, by the way. I will invite Dr. Joydeep Ghosh, who is a good friend, and I admire his paper with Basanta Pradhan a lot. So, Joydeep ji, over to you for the discussant remarks.
Okay, thank you, sir. A very good afternoon to all of you. Hope I'm audible. Is it okay? Can you hear me? Okay. 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 I would like to thank ICRIER for giving me this opportunity to be a discussant for this presentation. Indeed, it's a privilege to participate in this discussion with so many distinguished panelists and audience. So regarding, I was told to mention something about, my work, about my paper, the structure of the model that I have worked with, and of course, to provide some comments. So as far as the modeling approach is concerned, okay, to begin with, I would like to make a few comments. CG is mainly used as is mainly used for analyzing policies. It is not meant for forecasting. Okay, CG models are not meant for forecasting. They are used mainly for policy analysis. That is how they are designed. Okay, so from that, we have to sort of, make out how they can be applied, how they are applicable, especially in the policy scenario. So, starting from that, CG models, they have a very, standardized, modeling framework. So, and they are, and it is because they are based on the same principles, right? It's, completely based on a neoclassical theory. And where we have the basic tenets going on, producers maximize profits, consumers maximize utility, there is equilibrium in the demand and supply of products and services. So this is the standard approach. So here, as far as the modeling approach is concerned, I do not have any comments as such. The basic structure is almost the same. So, we have the factors of production, capital, labor, and of course, energy. And in our model, we have, energy is distinguished between electric and non-electric. And electric is further disaggregated into renewables and non-renewable, solar, wind, hydro, and so on. And of course, non-electric is composed of petroleum products, gas, oil, and so on. So this is the first distinction. And of course, there is substitution between the factors of production in response to changes in relative prices. So that's the basic framework. And of course, consumption, again, I think it was not clear what type of consumption function you have used. In our models, we use the standard linear expenditure system. And then in production, we use Leontief and CES, a combination of Leontief and CES. And as far as the dynamics are concerned, we make some assumptions. So we assume growth in total factor productivity for all sectors, sectoral increase in total factor productivity, increase in investment, increase in labor supply, as well as increase in energy efficiency. So these are some of the levers that are applied in the model. Our work has mainly been on carbon pricing. And we have mainly analyzed the effects of carbon prices on the Indian economy, on emissions, and so on. And although you might say, of course, but again, it's sort of an ex ante analysis. Now we are coming up with carbon markets. We are talking about carbon markets, but most of our work took place about 10 years ago. So we have analyzed mainly carbon pricing policies, carbon pricing as well as trading policies. And in this context, I might say that, basically we have looked at three things. First is growth, then is equity, that is income distribution. And the third aspect we have focused on is environment, that is GHG emissions, only CO2 emissions. So we have focused on these three aspects only at the macro level. So as Dr. Chadha pointed out, an important finding of our research is that there are trade-offs. There are trade-offs, especially recycling of carbon taxes. We have this trade-off. I mean, basically, you cannot have all the three going together. So if you want to increase efficiency, there will be, some loss in maybe income distribution, if you want to increase efficiency and lower emissions, then there might be some trade-off in terms of equity. Or if you try to improve equity there and lower emissions, there could be trade-off in terms of GDP. So basically, we observe trade-offs between these three important variables in our modeling exercises. So again, linking it to India. Basically, we have to understand our priorities. Again, the government sets many things, but we have to understand what is more important for us. We have to understand whether bringing down emissions is more important, or increasing the share of renewables is more important, whether equity is important or efficiency is more important. So first of all, that we have to focus on. And as I said, and of course, based on the presentation that I saw, and which mostly corroborates with facts that coal and lignite, we have strong employment linkages. Coal, lignite employment linkages, and whether in the Indian context, how much solar and wind renewables are relevant in terms of employment generation. So that's certainly needs to be probed. I must congratulate the authors, because you have started talking about employment in the context of renewables, which is, I think, a way forward. We have never looked at employment in our model, so we have just looked at broadly this growth, employment, growth, equity, and emissions. But employment, it certainly needs more research. And in my view, when we talk about renewables, for a country like India, we should also be thinking about bioenergy, biogas, for example. Biogas is a labor-intensive industry. So of course there could be other issues with biogas or bioenergy, but I certainly think that a country like India could look at these biofuels, biogas, and so on. And so broadly, these are some of the main comments. And of course, I would like to say, the generation of renewables, RE, it depends on many factors. Whether the renewable energy takes off in India to the desired levels certainly needs more research, because ultimately employment generation is based on so many factors. It is not just it's difficult to connect the increase in gigawatts in RE to employment generation. It is certainly difficult. There are so many other aspects that need to be considered. So with these remarks, I will stop, and maybe if there are any questions or issues, I can come back later. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaideep, for it. Yes, please.
So, sir, just to quickly ask, because you mentioned that you've looked at energy efficiency increases. So, how have you particularly modeled them?
Oh, energy efficiency we did not model. We modeled productivity increase in renewables. So basically, we changed sort of the production function parameter, the efficiency parameter. So technological change. So sort of increasing the supply, that aspect. Yeah.
Can we proceed now? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Jaideep, for this detailed analysis of how the CGE models work. And probably what I should have said in my initial comments, that these are counterfactual exercises, and that is what the policy regime exercises. However, you added one element to it, that is investment increase, which will obviously mean that what if so somewhat we are trying to look in the future also. The other thing that I took from your so many other points that you have made is that the data on biomass is a missing link. If you see the energy balance, energy commodity balance by MOSPI, somehow IEA reports biomass data, but if I correctly remember, the Niti Aayog report as well as the IEA, as well as the MOSPI, energy balance and energy commodity balance are missing out on biomass data, which is an important source of energy for a country like India. So please include that work also in your ongoing work. And the other questions which I have raised, you will obviously be at least commenting on them. Now, I give it to Aman for further discussion on how he sees this new exercise developing and what are the points that need to be looked at.
Well, there are so I'm here to bring out kind of the experiences of employment, of measuring or kind of integrating modeling approach in a CG, computational general equilibrium, versus a partial equilibrium kind of approach. And I have also more experience in the latter. So of course, maybe I can bring in a few points there. So when we talk about a partial equilibrium approach, we are basically talking about this system of very detailed energy economic models. The advantage of them is, in a CG type framework, you have detailed different type of agents, let's say, who are either they are optimizing or they are maximizing their welfare. But when we talk about a partial equilibrium motor, it is very much energy rich. So you will have detailed. So you will have an aggregate macroeconomic sector, but unlike a CG framework where these sectors are interacting with each other, where you're basically saying, okay, if I take $1 away from one particular activity, how does it impact other activities? This type of approach is not available in a partial equilibrium model. What you do have is you generally use it to answer questions like, okay, which are the technologies where I should do investment? What type of time horizon I am looking at? So these type of questions you can answer generally in this. So using generating information on employment from these type of models is actually relatively new, and the approach is pretty straightforward. But even within this approach, there are interesting insights can be generated. So generally, what is this approach that we are using? So these models can tell you, as I said, what kind of capacity generation and different technologies that you expect. And the approach is very similar to what Diya had in the kind of last session, where you're using employment multipliers, right? So you're basically saying, okay, if I install 1 megawatt of, let's say, solar, how much of jobs are created? Direct jobs, again, not indirect jobs, are created in the manufacturing stage, in the operation maintenance space, and so on. So you can define various approaches. And here in our work, what we found out were 2 and 3 very interesting things. So most of the work that has been done on employment multipliers, it has been limited to the OECD. So it's been only in the last few years that you would see some very India-specific studies. So people have really gone and asked, there have been huge surveys to ask, let's say, different power companies, how many people they are employing. So that's the first part. The second part is, they are even within countries where you have a data, these numbers vary widely, right? And not even within a country, even within a region, if you have, let's say, 2 wind powers plants being installed side by side, you will find that the number of people they are employing are actually quite different. So the second inherent thing is that there are ranges. Whenever I talk about employment multipliers, there are huge ranges. And therefore, it's very important that at India level, first of all, we have these numbers, and secondly, that we are able to capture range in terms of course, capacity. So, but also in terms of different structures, different ways in which these structures are. Different ways in which companies are structured. The third thing interesting that we found out was, if you just look at operation and maintenance kind of jobs, let's say in solar, India is actually already in par in terms of people you would employ for a megawatt with a lot of industries in OECD countries. So at least in the energy sector, in O&M, you cannot say that that we are employing much more people. So we are already very competitive in terms of how many people you would need, let's say, to install a megawatt of solar, and so on and so forth. The third thing, which is very essential in this type of approaches, is that you also need to understand how these numbers are actually changing over time. So it doesn't make any sense that you are saying, well, now I need 5 people to install a megawatt of solar, but 10 years down the line, it will be same. And we already know that in wind turbine maintenance, there are now drones being used, AI technology being used. So of course, we should expect the number of people you need for installation will actually decrease over time. So but of course, this type of data, these type of studies are not available, and that's also one kind of need of the hour. Now, in terms of results, what we have seen, basically, I'll talk about what we are seeing at, let's say, a global level, national level, and maybe a little bit about regional level through these approaches, right? So at a global level, what we are saying is that most of the employment, if you want to really catch on, say, if employment generation is something that you are really looking at in the future in a world, you have to have manufacturing in the country. Right. So operation and maintenance, as I said, are very few jobs. They are much lower than what you would have in a coal power plant. So you really have to focus on manufacturing. It's even more important than construction installation, because of course, construction and installation are regional jobs, right? So you would have them anyway. But manufacturing installation is very important because the number of people employed there per megawatt is actually very high. So you need to focus on that, and whichever country does it will have huge employment gains, right? Of course, the next thing we are seeing is that, energy and employment is very peculiar because at a global level, it employs pretty much negligible amount of people, right? So we saw that what it was 0.4% in India. The numbers on at a global level are actually also not very different. But what makes it very special is, of course, we have now energy transition. We are talking about policies which will directly impact these people. And secondly, this huge multiplier effect that you talked about, which you don't see in a lot of other types of economies. Right. So the role of manufacturing, as I said, is very clear. The range of multiplier. Then second, the last thing what we are seeing at a state level is that I mean, we all know that, most of the jobs, of course, the coal jobs, when we're talking about in a just transition type of aspect, we are seeing that at a state level, most of these jobs will be taken away, in the eastern states, and a lot of them are going to be generated in the western states, western and southern states, where we have huge solar potential. But but now coming back also to the manufacturing question, I think a lot of eastern states, they really have to look at, okay, if they want to somehow compensate a lot of these jobs, there are few approaches. One is they similarly need to look at, for example, what was said was about biogas sectors. I mean, it might be a sector where in the larger scheme of schemes, in the whole energy transition, it might not be that important, looking at, of course, a lot of cost related questions. But if your objective is really that you want to take care of all this unemployment that will happen, and we're talking about reskilling and everything else, we have to start thinking if technologies where the employment multiplier is actually huge to start employing those. So in eastern states, it would be, for example, we are looking at biogas maybe, because solar, etc. We are, of course, this was also announced that there needs to be higher, investment in solar so that they can also get some pie, some part of the pie of that is happening. But really looking at simple employment factors, maybe even looking at can you have manufacturing type of industries in the East? So that's one more point. And I think the last point I want to make is that we have to look at all these transitions not in silos, because especially questions on employment, they are happening in a much wider structural change that is happening in the country, right? So we are right now, our share of manufacturing GVA is 14%. And it really, the kind of the bigger questions, the decisions that we are making, in which direction the economy is moving, that really answers the question, what will happen also from, an energy transition perspective. Because energy transition is still a very small, it is a big transition, but still small in terms of the wider transitions that are happening in the country. So everything needs to be looked in that context. My last point is just related to the kind of, because CG is a very rich framework and can answer a lot of questions that kind of this partial equilibrium approach cannot. And a few of them are very pertinently also pointed by Dr. Chadda, especially looking at, let's say, the effect of carbon pricing. I mean, because CG type of models can say, well, if you introduce a policy and it changes how much people consume and how they expend and how much they spend. So it means that you can also answer questions which are much more holistic than, say, just plug and play renewable type of policy. So I think I would be looking forward to how these can be answered. But thank you very much.
Any question you have? No. Okay. No, I'm first giving you a chance. Thank you very much, Dr. Aman Malik. We have not met, but when I was hearing you, I was also looking at, somehow we have not met. So looking at your work that you did at Potsdam. So my compliments first. Hope that when you were talking about the partial equilibrium models, you had the IAMs in mind.
Yes.
So another very rich area of modeling is the integrated assessment models, for which Potsdam PIK is so well known for. And thank you, Amrita, for making my introduction to Dr. Aman Malik, who I'm meeting for the first time. But I will just give a couple of minutes of comments on, as Amrita said, a happy combination between the partial equilibrium and the general equilibrium. Look, general equilibrium is rich. I'm glad Aman pointed that out. because it gives us a more holistic picture. At the same time, when one would like to understand a particular sector, one would have to go in depth into that sector and that sector's performance. And IAM's integrated assessment models are known to do that in a very rich manner. So my compliments, Aman, for having introduced that part to all of us because we at CSEP are trying to do something already with Utkarsh Patel joining us. So I think this panel has been put very well so that you have CGE views, you have from Dr. Ghosh, you have the partial equilibrium, rich views from Dr. Malik. And now I think if Amrita, I'll give you the chance if you would like to take some points already made or by three of us, or would you like to have the questions first? Now it is in your court.
So I think let me start by sort of reacting to some of this, and some of these are sort of omissions on my part, so apologies beforehand. So, sir, you had asked this question about elaboration on households. So for us in the model, there are 4 households that we've taken to sort of reduce the complexity. So it is rural poor, rural non-poor, urban non-poor. So we are taking poor to be defined as the lowest sort of quartile. So to keep it politically safe. For the base year employment, I think in the first part, Sajal had talked about using PLFS. So that is, we've kept it consistent. So it is not just for the electricity sectors, but also across the board for all sectors, we are using PLFS only. For slowdown of multipliers, I don't have a particular answer, but let me sort of borrow from what Aman just talked about. Is that with improved technologies, these sort of multipliers may fall. So I'm not exactly sure about how coal will change in the future. But then again, so it's anybody's guess. So not can't comment on it fully. About the replication of production structure, you have sort of hit the nail on the head. So we tried to do something what the Australian universities, so there is this very famous term model, the enormous regional model. So they are sort of modeling each state as a separate country, something like a EU, and each state has their own sort of production technologies, etc., etc. We tried to do that, and we were able to get, so data for manufacturing is easier to get. Agriculture with some, I would say, by hook or crook, you can still do, but the services is elusive. You cannot do a state level sort of a term model or any sort of state level disaggregation of production structures for services. And that is a big caveat. So we have right now made do with something by using location coefficients. And that is what has been used. Your point about critical minerals is very well taken. But right now we are not, I would say, equipped to handle it particularly. So that we will make a mention of it. I think about Joydeep sir, I think the question that I have asked, and thank you so much for your comments. Bioenergy is important, but you would also confess very difficult because it spreads across 3 sectors. So you will have to take some bits from forestry, you will have to take some bits from maybe livestock, so animal dung, you'll have to take some bits from crop residue. I know you have estimated the same, and I will look into it if we can do the same thing for us. Trade-offs, very well taken, yes. The point about investment also, I think we are not looking at investments in particular details. So we have a capital stock that is fixed, and that sort of grows in a sort of recursive way through the savings. So we are not putting very devoted attention to investment or how much investment would transition cost. But yes, important point, we will look into it. Aman made, I think, a lot of important points that I was furiously trying to note down. These things about employment multipliers, and specifically if I could sort of take away that as the headlines of what you talked about. So I take away this point about the importance of manufacturing, even more than construction, say, because construction you would see is the second largest employer in the country. So yes, points to ponder. And also thinking about setting up new manufacturing practices or setting up new manufacturing zones in sectors where employment multiplier is high. So you are sort of giving a new decision variable for regional development planning that needs to happen. Excellent, I think very well taken, and thank you so much. I would say all panelists and also, sir, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I think my next invite would have been Dr. Kirit Parikh. So for some reason, he's just moved out. So if he can come, I think his comments would be, I mean, I consider him one of the most knowledgeable persons on CGE. So so I would have invited him, but he just walked out for some reason. Okay, now I think it is open for questions. We have 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes to go. So please identify yourself and ask a specific question rather than a detailed remark or comment, so that we can have more questions, we can have more, that increases our knowledge. In fact, I'm reserving 5 minutes definitely for Dr. Kirit Parikh when he comes back. Questions, please. Identify yourself and ask a specific question.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Hi, I'm Abhay Gupta. I'm a research associate at the Indian Statistical Institute here in Delhi. And my question is about the alternative policy scenario that was presented. So I'm not exactly clear what policy is being implemented. It said that there's an improvement in energy efficiency. So what is that improvement? How does it vary from the BAU scenario? And then how is it being modeled in your framework?
Mike. Any other question, please? We have, yes, please identify yourself and ask the question.
Hello, I am Rishabh Verma, and I am a research analyst at CEEW. And my question is that you mentioned that this research also have indirect jobs taken care into it. So when you talk about indirect jobs in terms of renewable energy, when we are transitioning to solar or wind, we also take care, like we have to take into account energy storage. So does this take into account this study, the jobs created because of energy storage? Thank you.
So let me take the first question first. So for alternative scenario, what we've taken is that we have assumed that there is going to be a reduction in energy. So in one of my slides, I had shown you what are the energy sectors that we are consuming, we are incorporating. And there is a reduction, systematic reduction of, if I'm not wrong, 15% till 2030. So that goes on from the base year till then. So that is sort of in a sense smoothened, and that is the reduction that we're seeing. As far as indirect jobs are concerned, so there is a problem. So basically, how we do it is this is a I minus A inverse matrix. So it will look at backward impacts, not forward impacts. So suppose for renewable energy, you have more sort of solar power. So if you have chips, you have glasses, you have other sort of iron and steel structures that go into it. So those are the indirect jobs it can see. But forward looking, so others who would use renewable power or other things, that I don't think this is able to show. So it is more backward looking factor.
Your name, identify yourself and ask the question, please.
Raj, I'm an energy consultant. My question to ICRIER is you have taken into consideration PAT sector industries, right? So PAT sector industries means highly energy intensive and or large scale. So with the advent of modernization going on and all of them being engaged in this thing, digitalization of their operation systems and all, there will be huge impact on this thing, skill jobs and all, and it will be reduced. So impact of digitalization for such sectors would be a consideration for your studies as well. Any comment?
Any comment?
I per se don't have a comment on that, but the thing here is that for us, the technology coefficients that we work with. So basically, 2018, the base year is a snapshot view, right? So this is the sort of inputs that go into production processes. You cannot tinker too much with these efficiencies. So this is a recursive dynamic. This is not dynamic in the total sense that you have coefficients also changing over time. Yes, you can do so as simulations, but I am not particularly sure. But yes, digitalization we can probably see, but that marginal impact of digitalization on energy efficiency, I'm not sure if anybody's done a study. So that can be incorporated as a simulation.
Yes, please, this side.
Hi, Sajal here. I work as a consultant for Think Through Consulting. My question is around the state level SAMs that you have built. I understand the production structures is very difficult to build at the state level. So when you see 41 sectors at the state level, I mean, I know it's available at the national level at 140 sectors, but how did you do it at the state level for 41 sectors? First question. The other question I had is around the electricity sector. When you say you you bifurcated into coal and non-coal, again, at the state level, it's difficult. I know at the national level, it's available, but how would you, impute it at the state level?
Okay, so first let's talk about the production technologies. So for production technologies, we are using the value added shares. So basically, what we are sort of saying is that a good that is produced by India, by Punjab, by Maharashtra, by whatever, will be produced with the same sort of technology mix. So you are then sort of distributing it based on the value added of that sort of production sector in the SDP. If you will. So the recipe of producing remains the same. It is just sort of brought up or brought down based on the value added. For electricity sector, that is based on generation technologies. In fact, if I'm recalling correctly, so the rows have been created based on the generation mix, while the columns have been adjusted based on the cost of generation. So it's generation multiplied by the levelized value of electricity production.
Yeah, I think maybe the sense coming out of that question is that how do you differentiate the small AIJs across states versus the national technology structure? So any comment on that?
I think we've kept it the same.
For the states.
For the states.
So that was my question too, that
yes, exactly.
that production structure across the states is same as the national structure. So that is one of the issues that one can look at.
Definitely. So once we have better data on services, I think we can do a much better job. So as I said, both agriculture as well as manufacturing is amenable to disaggregating things at the state level, but services is very problematic. So we've tried to kept it harmonized because it would have been very, I'm not sure. So I think let me defer to Chedda sir on that one to have different methodologies for different sectors. So we have tried to keep it the same by using the same location coefficient sort of a thing. But if services, so my excuse being that if services data is available, we will be able to do a much better job of disaggregating production structures.
Okay, when you talk about the Australian term model. I think you're referring to the Center of Policy Studies and Peter Dixon.
Yeah.
And I think even though there is no other question, I am prompting Mr. Devendra Pratap to say a few words because he has worked with me while I was at NCAER working in detail with Peter Dixon at COPS. And they're even though I have departed, they are continuing their relationship with. So, Devendra ji, any comments on the state level modeling? And you said that there was an Odisha CGE just released by NCAER because you have worked very hard on that. So you didn't raise your hand, but I'm prompting you.
Apart from telling about models of COPS model, I'll tell you the general question which has been coming into hall regarding using a state level IO tables. Using construction of a state level IO table, which has been a tradition, good old tradition in the country, and we were very rich in Gokhale when most of the models, state level model, Hashim Saab work, Hashim and Dadi's matrices, but off late, people started thinking that construction of a state level model is not much useful or a relevant exercises. And off late, certain as a bypass or certain kind of a good solution for this as Amrita indicated, there's a model called as a term, the enormous regional model, and which is housed at Center of Policy Studies, and Center of Policy Studies is kind of a powerhouse of SAG models. They used to have one after another model, and not only produce a model, they continuously work for years and years on. And the one which we are referring and Dr. Chadha referred, or any model, which is an anecdotal model of a GTAB model as well, and GTAB model originated from that. And off late, what these people do, they make one model and try to bring in use these kind of a modeling framework. There was a RNE model, new offshoot came, enormous model, Monash model, Inesh model, to name a few new. And each one of the faculty, they were specializing into it. So now leave that apart. My observation about construction of a state level model, I think using a national level IO table for a state technology is a very good exercise, because ultimately national level coefficients also originate from a state level aggregations. Apart from a difference in trade and transport margin and technologies, like say for example, what Dr. Chadha referred, when we were working with the Peter Dixons, there were 6 kind of a paddies we originated. Paddy originated in a Tamil Nadu, paddy originated in a Punjab, paddy. So if you can bring in those kind of a peculiar technology specificities, national level IO tables are the wonderful exercises to be taken as a starting point for a state level IO table. And I can guarantee you, if you will start making IO table for all 36 states, it will take more than 3 years even to construct a state level IO table. Then also you won't come at. Even I can tell you, there was a debate about 140 sector. Now SUT, new avatar of a IO table. Dr. Chadha published a paper, converted that into. These are very construction issues in these kind of things are very minute. Construction of SUT into IO table is a horrendous exercise. It needs 6 months. Even somebody like me who is skilled enough, it takes months and months. So we shouldn't get into a state level specificities, in particularly about construction of IO table at a state level. National level IO table are fairly a very good approximation. Unless sometime what happened, we constructed IO table for Maharashtra, because Maharashtra government was very happy. Oh, we have constructed and given them IO table. And it was nothing, just an approximation of an all India table. But funders sometimes wanted that, and you have a compulsion just to make a state level. I think national level.
Thanks, Devendra. I think it is good that I prompted you and you came out with so many points and suggestions.
Thank you.
And for those who are not initiated to what Devendra was saying, Center of Policy Studies at Victoria University, formerly Monash University in Australia, is the powerhouse of CGE models. So even the US government consults Peter Dixon for their US ITC exercises, and he is the originator of the entire GTAP, GEMPAC, etc., the CGE tradition. And last but not least, he is the only living student of W.W. Leontief. So obviously he is the powerhouse. Peter Dixon, those who have not, those known, it's simple, Google away, COPS, Victoria, Peter Dixon, and then you reach the person who is maybe close to 80, maybe more, but still very active. And as I said, the only living student of W.W. Leontief, which you are talking about, Leontief inverse. There is another question coming up. Yes, please. Yes, please identify yourself and ask the question.
I'm Dinesh Sharma. I'm a journalist. My question is about re-skilling, which is a great deal of talk is about re-skilling. I think it is a kind of afterthought when you are closing the door when the horse has bolted. Why not bring new skills at the educational level? Teach new skills to students in institutes, education. Then that will be better than, of course, re-skilling the employees who are already there.
Yes.
I think that was a comment. Not a
Okay.
question.
Yeah, no, I think the important point is that reskilling is very important in this changing dynamic technologies. If we do not reskill people, there is going to be a lot of unrest. And I think this is a lot to be discussed. This is a separate topic from what we have discussed today. And the discussion has been very rich. I'm only missing, we couldn't find him.
Yeah.
Losses ours. No, yeah, it'll, you should have included him as a panelist. I don't know. So if there are other questions, we still have 5 minutes to go, because this kind of, even if many of us do not understand what this modeling is about, this gives ideas to the young scholars who are sitting here, that a lot can be done in the area. And I think 2-3 Googles, you can find what is being done at GTAP, Purdue, what is being done at COPS, Victoria, and what has been done, the tons and tons of CGE work actually has been done by the University of Michigan, Bob Stern and Alan Deardoff. We were fortunate to have worked with them in the late 90s. So we are becoming history now. So more young scholars should come forward and take IAMs, and we have Dr. Malik sitting here. Take the CGE, we have the young generation, Dr. Amrita Goldar, and another young generation on the TV that you can see, Dr. Joydeep Ghosh. As I said, we will be very happy to help, guide, but I think a whole new generation on IAMs and CGE needs to be built. So, Amrita, closing remarks from you. Oh, please, please. I've been asking for questions.
Not question, just wanted to inform Amrita that digitalization has potential for saving energy up to 15%, which is being currently undertaken by a worldwide consultant, Mr. Nader, based in Dubai. He operates from Dubai, and I have been in touch with him for getting write-up for digitalization in cement industry for our industry association. So he sent me an article, and he's also implementing already done implementation of digitalization in Ramco Cements in South and many others. So just now I can give you the contact details of Mr. Nadir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now over to you,
Yeah.
Amrita.
Yeah.
Unless there is last chance. Last chance for one question. One question from a young scholar. Yes, please.
Hi. I'll just apologize in advance for asking this, but like based on my understanding of CG models, an issue that all modelers face is trying to find reliable estimates of elasticities. And these estimates that are typically used seem to be really old and aren't region specific. So I just wanted to ask where the estimates are coming from for your model.
Okay, so this is a sensitive question. We have used information from secondary literature. So basically, I think there was a Povitz paper, so that had given some elasticities. So we are using with that, and then we've sort of perturbed it a little bit to once we were calibrating. So that is the source for the elasticities used. So I think Chadda sir will ensure that we get the maximum bang for our buck in terms of knowledge that knowledge spillovers that will happen from the event. But in the interest of time, let me sort of quickly close today's proceedings by giving a vote of thanks. So obviously, so any event that is a success, and I hope you will consider this event a success too, needs a lot of hands to go behind it. So let me sort of thank the ICRIER events team, Neha, Rajkumar, Rajesh, Karan, Riya, the project team. So you saw some of them who were sort of when the authors were called upon to release the report. So definitely them. So Sajal, Diya presented, and you also heard Polami speaking and Abhishek, but also others within the team who are sort of flitting around here and there. So you see Sarwar there, Karthik, Ritika, Sonuji. So thanks a lot. Funders, I think I should have started with that. Oops. But funders, so ICEF, thanks a lot. And Shubhashis as well. And all speakers and panelists since the morning. So thanks a lot for giving us your inputs and your very kind suggestions on improving the work further. We will take everything on board, and hopefully you'll see a better product soon, very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Joydeep, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, you're speaking from abroad, so I know. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.